We believe that men can be powerful forces for good in their communities. The True Coach podcast exists to equip coaches with the tools they need to prepare boys and young men for life.
Welcome back to True Coach. We're going to continue the conversation around the 3 key shifts that are framed around the True Coach curriculum. Last week we spoke about from easy to difficult, so what it means for a boy during a game or during their sport of when they settle into easy, and how as a coach we should pull them out of that and into the difficult things, because that's life and it's prepping them for when things in life actually become difficult so that they're used to when that happens. And so the one that we're going to look at today will be the second shift, which is from self to others. And as we know, on a team, you're dealing with a lot of individuals, and some of them want to be the hero. Some of them are really quiet in the background. And what does that mean as a coach? How do we help the team navigate actually as a team, so that the individuals know that it's not just about them. It's about serving their brotherhood and their family and their team. And this shift from self to others, it teaches humility to the team. It teaches service. It teaches family or brotherhood, and teaches leadership, because we want these kids to use their individual strength to benefit the team, so that it can prepare them to serve their team and their communities and their families as they grow older. And it's something as a coach that we can intentionally teach to these kids, because there's going to be so many moments in a game and in life where they have to maybe not do what their self wants to do, and do it for the betterment of their family or their community. So yeah, we'll just kind of open it up with that. And I think one of the big things that I have noticed coaching specifically our U11 rep hockey team this year is these kids are fairly young. And so I know that it changes as they get older, and sometimes you have big hot shots on a team who will just hog the puck or the ball the entire time. And then sometimes you have teams that are almost too passive and maybe listen a little bit too well. So there's also some freedom that has to be coached within that as well. And so the one thing that I am curious about is different age groups too. Because Tyler, I know you coach U13 basketball, and I've done U11, and then obviously much younger than that. Do you think that, tell me a little bit about the experience of how you've seen this shift from self to others work with your U13 basketball team?
Yeah, I think it's one of the hardest shifts. So we're talking about each one of these shifts, from ease to difficulty, from self to others, from control to surrender. These are all things that young men have to learn as a rite of passage. So if you think of it like a continuum from 1 to 10, and you've got 1 over here. So this is I'm a boy, and I'm just doing what feels good. And it's not like boys are exclusively selfish, but boys tend to think about themselves more. It's just natural. And so if you think about, an 8-year-old boy starts over here at a 1, and there's a continuum, all the way to 10. So the idea that this shift is really getting at is we're going to move them slowly from 1 maybe to a 5 or a 6 by the time we're done, if it's U16, U17, whatever the age group is. I think when you get to the college level, like 22, 23, I think you can talk more about we're getting now to the point where you're almostly a fully mature man. A man cognitively matures in their mid-20s, so you're getting close to that point. So we can expect there to be you got to be living your life in service of others, and so that's where that ultimate, the 10 comes in. If you think about, we can think about public figures or people that everybody would know who they are. Just off the top of my head, like civil rights leaders in the United States. So obviously, we think about Martin Luther King Jr. That's a guy whose level of service to the world, it wasn't just his family, his community, his people, his country, the world. It was at a full maximum 10, to such a point that he gave his life up for it. And so he's somebody that we remember, and his life was actually quite difficult. The stuff he had to go through, death threats, and living, I would imagine, with his family, and always being kind of out there in the public. So there's this extreme level of service, and I think to some degree all men are called to do that. And so this idea is we're going to slowly move these boys from this 1 to by the time we're done with them, hopefully 5, 6, 7, 8, on that continuum of selflessness and service to the community. So I think for me, a lot of it comes down to the success of the team. So sometimes when a team is less successful, it's easier for individual players to be more selfish because they're not winning. And so if I don't see the results of that selflessness, then maybe I'm just going to take it upon myself, and I'm just going to worry about me and me getting better. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that actually works. I think any team sport, there's a high level of IQ. So there's whether it's in, I don't know what they call it in hockey, but basketball, it's court vision. So, when I'm parallel my teammate or up ahead of the play in a fast break on offense, I know who I'm going to pass to before I even get the ball. If the ball's coming to me, I already know. So I know I got 2 or 3 options, and I see them all, and I'm already thinking about if I'm open for a layup, I take it. But I also know I've got guys beside me, teammates beside me. So I think there's the team success. You can't have team success without selflessness and without constantly thinking about your teammates and putting them in positions to succeed. And so different positions require different levels of selflessness. If you're a center or a power forward in basketball, somebody who's relied on to get rebounds, you putting your body on the line. Your guards are shooting threes and missing, and you got to go and go down low and get hit and get a rebound, and that's not easy. If you're a guard in basketball, your job is to break down the defense to create advantages for your teammates. So every position has its unique role in the way that it serves the team. So that's one of the things that this shift does, is it identifies who does what, and then it teaches how that role serves the team. So I think it's up to the coaches, right? You got to identify who your players are and what their strengths are, and teaching them how their strengths serve the team.
Yeah, that's a huge part, because you can watch any sport, and I especially notice it in hockey because that's what I'm mostly involved with. But we watch, we don't just sit and watch our U11s, we watch U13, U15, and you can tell right away the coach's style specifically to this shift, because that's one of the first things you will notice when you see a team is like, oh, these guys play together, or there's a bunch of individual kids who think they're heroes on this team. And that could be really frustrating for some of the less skilled players on the team, because it typically, that mentality of I am going to be the hero can rest on some of your top players, because they feel they're the best, and they feel that they need to be the ones who don't pass the puck, who will just go in circles in the offensive zone until they find a hole and then end up losing the puck, and then it ends up hurting the team. Or you can even find success in a team that is more focused on self, but eventually it crumbles and it doesn't teach the team anything at all. So that's 100% one of the biggest things we see. But then when you see a team working together, you see them cycling the puck, you see them following their systems, and it even bleeds into from ease to difficulty, because as a team, if you're really preaching the self to others, then things get hard. Do they forget about self to others and just make it about self? Because it's almost easier to hey, I want to be the hero. It's going to be easier for me to not pay attention to my team and just try to make it happen on my own. So that's where it's so important to be like, hey guys, I know this is difficult, but we have to keep working together, because sometimes that's the win in a game. You can even lose, but you work together and you fought as a team, and that's a way better win than having two heroes going out there and potentially winning the game for you. But huge coach mentality for that one.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's a lot on the coaches, and I think it's hard. It's hard. It's, I like to, obviously I want to teach my players to maintain composure, to play in a way that they're always thinking about the benefit of the team. So that means if I'm upset or if I'm frustrated, I'm not going to do anything that's detrimental to the team. And as a coach, you have to model that too, right? And then sometimes as a coach, it's harder because it shouldn't be harder, but it is, because you're not able to get out there on the court. You can only teach your players, and you can train them, and you can instill these values in them, and you can teach them the exact way you want to play. But it doesn't, it takes time to get them there. So I think one of the things as a coach that we have to be conscious of is, what are we here for? Are we here? Sometimes there's pressure from the organization or from parents to win all the time. So winning can actually come at the detriment of the development of the player. So the player's ability to play the game and to develop their own skill, winning can come at a detriment. A real simple example of that is basketball is a sport where you can really shorten your bench. So you have 12 players and you can play with 8. You play a whole game with 8 players. That means 4 guys are not touching the court. A principle for me in youth sports is you play your players. If you have 12, even if one of them's a project, he still gets on the court during the game. And we've seen that so what we'll do is, if we have spots to fill during tryouts, we just look for athletes. They don't have to be, their skills don't have to be polished. They don't need to be able to shoot. It'd be nice if they could handle the ball a little bit so you don't have to deal with all the turnovers. But the biggest thing is, like, I know that if you can run and jump, if you've got quick feet, and I can see that you have a high motor, like, it doesn't matter. We've had guys come in who never, like one of the guys on our team this year, he had been shooting the ball around in his driveway for 3 months before he came to tryouts, but he could run and jump, and he had a good motor. He was competitive, and the way that he's grown is amazing. But I play him, I get him out there, I put him in situations that challenge him, and if I'm thinking about winning all the time, I might not do that. So you can tell, and speaking of the way a team plays, it's just wild. Like, the way that some organizations and coaches, the mentality is, we're going to teach our 10-year-olds to play a zone defense. So if you know anything about basketball, a zone defense is where you might be a 3-2 or a 2-3. So you're putting 3 players basically 6 feet out from the baseline, just out from underneath the basket, and they're creating these little square zones that they're responsible for. And then you've got 2 guys up top, same thing, they're responsible for these zones on the court. What that does is it challenges opposition teams to shoot, offenses to shoot. When you're 10 years old, you're having trouble launching that ball and hitting the basket to begin with. So basically, the coaches are using a cheat code, and it happens with us too. Even at U13 level, we've got some shooters, but the consistency of a 3-point shot for our best shooter might be 30 to 35%, and there's only 2 of those guys on our team. Okay. So most guys are not shooting the ball at a consistent rate. So teams know, hey, if I teach my guys a zone defense, we literally play teams, and it drives me nuts, but like, we'll play teams where they're in a zone defense, and the defender, we're going up against a defense, and the defenders are standing there with their hands at their side, and they're looking around like they're daydreaming, and they're playing defense. And I'm like, if I'm the coach on that team, I gotta take a serious hard look in the mirror, because they're not learning to play defense. They're just learning to stand in a spot, and they know that it's a cheat code. They know these guys are not going to be able to shoot the ball well enough, and sometimes we do, and we beat them, and other times we don't, and we lose. But I've told our guys, I'm never teaching you to play a zone. If you go to college or whatever, I'd like it's fine. If you've learned to play man-to-man defense, the best defense is man-to-man defense. It's defensive principles. It's teaching you to get low. It's teaching you to move your feet. It's teaching you to have your hands out. Teaching you how to steal. It's all these things that you don't get playing a zone. So the point of that is, we, like coaches that are in it for their ego because they want to win, not because they want to develop their players. It's shocking the number of coaches that do that. Going like playing full court traps because you know that at this level the ball handling isn't great, and you can kind of hack the game and get more wins if you do this full court trap. And there's a whole other array of issues that come with that. The point is, as a coach, we have to be really conscious that we are prioritizing player development ahead of individual achievements, or ahead of winning. If we don't do that, we can't be surprised if our players act selfishly. So I think, and it comes down to like my mentality and how I approach it is, do I have ego in it, or am I here, at an 8 or a 9 on the self to others scale, right? Like, am I at a 1 here where all I care about is me and how I look to the parents? Or am I at a little further along as a man where I'm like, I don't really care if we lose and I look bad. I'd like to win, but at the same time, I'm not going to compromise the development of my players and their long-term success so that I can look good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all of these shifts are from going from one place to another place, which requires a transformation to happen in these youth. And something that we've said over and over again, but like one of the most important steps of true coach is that the coach themselves are transformed, because this is the only way that you can bring transformation. Because and you said it, you gotta take a look in the mirror. Like, okay, well, why am I just playing these kids all the time? Like, where are these external pressures coming from? Does the organization really want us to win? Am I feeling pressure from these parents, or do I want to puff my ego? Like, what is the most important thing? And especially in youth sports, it is developing the kids. But that doesn't mean that you don't strategically place kids in situations where you can get the win, because winning is important. If any kids have ever been on a team where they do not win the whole season, or they win a very small amount of games, like less than 10%, that begins to hurt the culture of the team, because the parents get frustrated, the kids get frustrated. And yes, it's important to pull the little wins out of a game, whether you had this many takeaways or this many dump-ins, those things are important. But winning is an undeniably important part of sport. So one of the things that I'll do is, yes, like, we need to look in the mirror, check our ego, and there's going to be times where, like, nobody's perfect. Your ego is going to show up, and you need to be like, okay, like, have I taken the necessary steps to recognize that, and can I set it aside for the betterment of the team? And developing the players is absolutely huge. And in hockey specifically, it's a very fast sport, and a kid is on the ice for a minute to a minute and a half at the most, and so you're constantly changing your bench. So one thing that I've done is I'll have special teams. So that's where you have like almost like a different set group of kids that go out, whether it's a power play or a penalty kill, or say you have an empty net because you're trying to win the game in the last minute, or you have overtime. And I think in those situations, I've had the kids on the team vocalize to me, why can't I be out there right now? Because they notice that they're not being played in those situations. But they did have lots of opportunity to play in other moments of the game, because that is fair. That's for the development of them. But then there comes a moment where, as a coach, I'm like, okay, it's special team time. And it's something that I communicate to the team all throughout the year, so that it's not a surprise, although they do need constant reminders. But it's like, hey, I have these guys out there because they are part of this special team, and it's going to help us get that win. So just because you're on the bench, just because you're sitting on the sidelines, doesn't mean you're no longer a part of this team. So I will get them to like cheer. Like, I'll get them to make the bench loud, especially in like an overtime situation. I'm like, you guys cheer, and they'll be banging their skates off the bottom of the bench and banging their sticks and making noise, and they get little chants going. And then that's a team mentality, even though you do have a more special group out there. And usually these special groups are on the higher watermark of the team skill because they're more capable of running those high stress scenarios. But the kids that are on the bench, it's like, hey guys, you are still a part of this team, and we're just gonna cheer. And then it fires up the whole thing, so you're still able to keep that team mentality while strategically putting a higher level of players out on the court or the ice.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge to get your players to be able to recognize, hey, this player has a special ability that maybe I haven't learned yet or I'm not as good at, and that's fine. That's okay. I'm glad that they have that ability. I can learn from them. I can see how they improve and see what they're good at.
It's hard for kids to do that because like you said, it takes men till they're like 25, 26 to be fully formed cognitively, which is insane. And we're dealing with like 10-year-olds, 12, 14, 16-year-olds. Like, they are a long ways. Like, their brain is still trying to figure out life. So it's like, that's something you constantly have to battle. Is some kids who are not very good think they're just amazing. And it's like, yes, but I'm here to help you just become a better player in general.
I mean, there's grown men in their 60s who still think like that. So it's it's not unique to, like, 12 or 13 or whatever age they are, kids. So I think that's really the crux of this whole thing is we have a crisis in our culture. It's something that many people have identified that is causing social and cultural decay, which is that for some reasons that we've identified, but we don't know. In our culture, we don't know what that reason is. Why do we have this term toxic masculinity? Where did that come from? And is it just like an outright attack on masculinity and men, or does it have some grounding in reality? I think both things can be true. I think it does have some grounding in reality, and I think it also is. It's not the best term to use. There are some men whose traits and whose characteristics, whose actions and behaviors in the world create damage. They damage things, and that's how men, like we talked about 2 weeks ago or 2 episodes ago, where they've got this fire in them, and it's how do we cultivate that? How do we teach that? So all these shifts are ways that we're intervening. It's an upstream intervention. So, and we talked about as well that Frederick Douglass quote, it's easier to raise a boy well than it is to fix a broken man. So if we can get in at this stage and teach these lessons, it's going to pay dividends when they're 35 years old or 25 years old. And life is not going to be easy just because you know these things, but knowing these things in a deep way, it takes years to know these things in a deep way. Knowing these things in a deep way means that when you face some of the struggles and some of the difficulties that are inherent to life, that you're not going to. Some people go passive, some men go passive, and they disconnect and they numb themselves. So they just entertain themselves. We've got a lot of options for that in our culture. That's what sports are for a lot of guys. It's even coaching sports, but a lot of it is just watching sports. Like, I was watching the hockey game last night, and I was there was a interview or some fan or something talking about how he's heartbroken. And I'm like, just think about this for a second. I understand you like the sport and you spent, but it's like you're watching complete strangers that this has no bearing on your life whatsoever. No bearing. Like, it doesn't matter if they win or lose. It's not going to change a single thing in your life, except if you've invested so much time in watching this team that these complete strangers feel like your best friends, and when they lose, it feels like you lose. That's sad. That's really sad, because it's like you've spent so much time trying to numb yourself, trying to escape reality, instead of building your life, instead of working on what you have in front of you. You're wasting your time watching somebody else build their life, watching somebody else make tens of millions of dollars doing something that they love to do, which is great, good for them, and there's a market for it because people watch it. But good for them that they can do that. But like, I'll watch it because I enjoy the game. Like, watching hockey in the playoffs it's wild. Like, these guys are ruthless. The way they compete, how hard they compete, how they're like, there's this inner fortitude that they have that is just like, I will do whatever it takes to win. I will put my body on the line. I will take a slap shot, off the face if it means that our team can win. You don't see that level of sacrifice every day, and so there's I enjoy it for that reason. Yeah. Yeah. But I haven't watched it at all until playoffs, because I know that doesn't show up until it's all, everything's on the line. So, but all that to say, I think that one of the things that this curriculum is going to do, what True Coach is going to do, is going to softly, hopefully, and gently convict some of the coaches and saying, hold on a second. I don't know if I understand this. I don't know if I know what it looks like to be selfless, I don't know if I've made this shift myself. Maybe there's some work I need to do, because a lot of it's just the awareness. If you don't know, if you've never been taught, then there's not much you can do about it. So I think my hope is that it creates an awareness amongst coaches at a individual level, at a heart level, an intellectual and a heart level, knowing, Absolutely. If I gotta teach my boys that I coach this, I gotta live it out too, and that's scary.
Yeah. That is such a big thing. Are we as individuals, as fathers, able to see that, and are we able to keep our ego at bay? And it's easiest if a head coach grasps these principles, because if you don't, and say you're a trainer or an assistant coach, and you really want to see your team go from self to others, but the head coach doesn't have that, it's going to be a fight, and it's going to be a battle, because trying to go up against somebody's ego, like, good luck. Like, it's not going to be a fun time. So it's so much easier when the head coach has access to these things, because then he's able to take the reins of the team and talk to the other coaches on the bench and be like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what it means. If I sense anybody's ego getting out of place, we'll have a conversation about it. And it doesn't mean that you're all hyper and crazy about it all the time. But the team, looks to the coaches, right? Like, how are the coaches? If the coaches are freaking out and swearing, all they are paying attention to is their own emotions. So I'm going to go do the same thing when I'm on the ice, on the court. I'm just going to go lose it in the same way that they are. And I think it was the Florida Panthers last year when they won. And they're like, when you see us on the ice and you're talking about playoffs, like, we might look like we're completely out of control when we're out there. He's like, but we're all very calm and collected. We just know what we're doing as a team. And that's exactly what it is. And that's a huge coaching style for that team specifically, because they don't have any hot shots that are just flying around. But then you watch a team like the Edmonton Oilers, where they have McDavid and Draisaitl and all these very talented players. That team struggles, and they're so unpredictable. And as a fan, it would be just awful because you don't know what's going to happen. But they don't have this steady pulse as a team that continues to move them, and that's a huge coach thing. And I think when you get into more men playing these sports, it becomes harder to put that in them, just like you were saying. So that's why it's so crucial to get these into these young kids. And I watched the Super Bowl, and at the very end, 3 of the players from the team who won it all said the same thing. So they even had a common language as a team, and they all said, we cannot be great without the greatness of others. And the coach said that, and two other guys said that, and I'm just like, wow. And you can tell that is something that the coach would have spoken over and over and over again. And he probably said it before the game, at halftime, like he would have said it a whole bunch. And so these guys know, and football, it's very much a team sport. Like you huddle and you figure out the plan that you're going to put in place, and everybody has to have their own little part. Like you rarely do you see just one guy run it from one end all the way for a touchdown. Like, yes, it happens, but it's a little bit different than hockey, soccer, basketball in that way, where you very much need the individuals. And so I think that's just such a good mentality that coaches need to have, is like, hey, like, and you can even say that to your kids, like, we can't be a great team without the greatness of others. You can't be great as an individual without the greatness of a team as a whole. And that's such a cool part that coaches just need to continue to hammer home to these kids.
It takes time. Yeah. One of the things I say is to the boys I coach is your teammates' success is more important than your own success.
Yeah.
So prioritize their success, because it's going to make you better too. So we see that. But yeah, it's coaching. It's there's a quote. I forget who says it, but it goes something like, the success of an intervention. So if we think about coaching, it's a subtle intervention. So when we show up to practice, when I show up to a game or practice, I'm these subtle interventions into the lives of the guys I'm coaching. It's one word at a time, one sentence at a time. The way that I approach them, say hi to them. There's these subtle little things that are happening all the time. But the success of that intervention is contingent or dependent upon my own transformation. So if I want to be a part of the transformation of another person's life and I'm not transformed, it's very unlikely that intervention is going to be successful. If I'm gonna transform or be a part of a transformation of another person's life, or give them the tools, the skills, the relational comfort they need, I have to be transformed myself. And because you can't be fake. Like, words are one thing, and words are good. Like, we've just talked about these phrases that coaches can use to help encourage their team. But when push comes to shove, and the emotions are high, and we're putting to practice what we talk about, that's when you're going to see the true colors come out. And so it's so important that there is a level of transformation that coaches are able to work through themselves. So I'm not sure how. I think everybody has their own journey. Everybody has their own story. Every coach, they have their own life story. But I do think it's important that there is some time, you spend some time. Hey, if you're thinking about, how do I help these boys? How do I help them become men? It starts with you. It starts with your own journey, and how do you have anybody in your life who's a mentor to you? Yeah. Maybe you have your own father who's there and able to do that still. Maybe you have another man in your life who kind of acts like a father figure, but that never ends. You could be 65 years old and you still need somebody like that. So I think that's another important part, is like, find a mentor in it, whether it's another coach that has more experience, or just somebody else in your life that you can go to with stuff, because we're talking about practicing what we preach. We're talking about, if you want to be a father figure or a mentor to some of these boys that you coach, then go get a mentor yourself, and walk it out that way. So I think a lot of this is that there's a level of humility that's required to recognize I don't have it all together. I make mistakes, and I need some help. And so I think that's where this comes down to the coach a lot, like we've talked about.
Yeah, and I even think that's an important thing that you can even communicate to your team, to your players, and to the parents that, like, hey, like, mistakes will happen, but I am here to continually be better for this team, for these kids, because when you have kind of the true coach mentality, you know that it's so much bigger than just one season and winning some games and maybe some tournaments. Like, you are here to help this kid, and then hopefully the next coach that teaches them also understands the true coach mentality. And that's how this tool can be so powerful, is that if these kids go from the age 10 to 18 to their early 20s through a series of coaches that understand the way that a true coach should be, it's going to impact that kid so much, and he's going to be way ahead of some 30, 40, 50, 60 year olds that we see today. And that's why it's such a crucial moment for true coach. And like you said in the very beginning, this shift from self to others, it's probably one of the hardest ones to teach. And even when they're really young, like, you're up against stuff. It doesn't even matter how old these kids are. They could be 7 years old and you are still battling that. Like, it's a constant battle, and even more so, it's a constant battle internally as a coach as we lead the team through. So although it's the second shift, it's probably one of the biggest ones.
Definitely. Yeah. One of the last thing I'll say is, when you were talking about just being open with the parents and saying there's going to be mistakes, I think one of the most important things that we can do is be vulnerable. Yeah. And maybe a better word is honest. Men don't typically like to feel vulnerable, but honesty,
which takes the humility.
Yeah. So I'll tell my guys, if we've had some games where we just made too many mistakes and we lost because we turned the ball over too much, or we gave up too many offensive rebounds. And so I'll say, look, like, this is why we lost. We lost because, and then I'll say, like, I make mistakes every day. I'll tell them I'm 39 years old, and I probably made a mistake every day of my life, but I'm not going to let the mistake define who I am. I'm going to learn from it, and I'm going to take that as a, hey, yep. Let's keep going. Let's figure out how we get better next time, and let's keep going. And I'll do that even with the parents. I have meetings at the beginning of every year and just tell them what the expectations are, tell them how we coach, what our coaching style is. Most of them know it because their kids been with us for a few years. But if there's new parents, I make sure that I'm just open and real with them. It's okay for them to see vulnerability. There's a really cool story. Jason Wilson, who runs a karate club in Detroit, Michigan, and has an organization called the Cave of Adullam, which is really doing this kind of work. He's been doing it, I think, for 2 decades. So he's really a forerunner in this space of merging sports with that journey towards masculinity. And so he describes, I forget exactly what happened, but he was running a class. So his classes are pretty intense. He gets his boys up to the point of, like, physically they're exhausted, and he's trying to draw out their emotions. He's trying to get them to a point where there's emotional vulnerability, so he can work with whatever's going on inside. And he gets a call. It was something about his mother, or something wasn't going well, and so he, like, breaks down in front of his boys, and he describes that moment as being this incredibly powerful moment where he was afraid. He was afraid to be that open and that honest. Like, he's crying in front of these boys that he's supposed to be the strong one. And he's crying, but the way that they came around him and they supported him through that, these kids, was like, to this day, he talks about it as one of the most transformative experiences of our lives. So I think the lesson that I take from that is, if it feels scary to be vulnerable with your team and with your assistant coaches, with whomever, obviously there's discretion involved. You don't want to be vulnerable with somebody has talks a lot. You want to be vulnerable with people you know that you can trust. If there's a lesson in that, is like, don't be afraid that your vulnerability is going to isolate you or cause somebody to be offended, because I think most often than not, it creates a deeper bond and a deeper relationship.
Again, from self to others, the shift we spoke about on the last podcast was from ease to difficulty. And again, these are like 3 core shifts that require a transformation. It's a process from going from one place to another, which is such a key thing, from easy to difficult, from self to my team to others. And then the next one that we're going to speak about will be from control to surrender. So we will discuss that on the next podcast. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the True Coach podcast. Boys need good men to help lead them through adversity. Youth sports serve as a forum for life lessons, and coaches must be prepared to help them prosper both in sports and in life.